Okay, so you want to own a parking lot. Buy some empty dirt, paint a few lines on it, sit back and watch cars pay you to sit still. That's the plan in your head. No work, no customers to please, no product to make, just asphalt and money. Here's the problem. You are about to learn that empty dirt is one of the most regulated, most expensive, most paperwork heavy businesses you can start. Before a single car ever pays you a dollar, you have to survive City Hall. Let's start there, not with the money, with how you actually get this thing built in the first place. The first thing you need is land that's legally allowed to be a parking lot. Not all land can become a parking lot. Every city splits land into zones: residential, industrial, commercial. You need land zone commercial, usually labeled something like C1 or C2 on your city's zoning map. Pull that map before you fall in love with any piece of land. If the zoning doesn't allow parking use, you either walk away or you apply for a zoning variance, which is basically asking the city for permission to break its own rule. That can take months, sometimes longer. Once you find land zoned right, you check something almost nobody thinks to check: traffic count. Your city's Department of Transportation tracks how many cars pass certain streets every day. A lot next to an airport, a hospital, a stadium, or a downtown office block is worth checking that traffic data for. A lot on a quiet residential street is worth almost nothing, no matter how cheap it is. Buying land can run anywhere from $1,500 an acre in a rural stretch to over $200,000 an acre in a packed city core. Same size of dirt, 100 times the price, just because of location. Leasing is usually the smarter first move. A lease deposit might run $10,000. Buying outright can run past $500,000, depending on where you are. Here's a trick experienced owners use. Instead of a flat monthly rent, they negotiate a percentage lease. You pay the landlord a slice of what the lot actually earns, not a fixed number every month, no matter what. That protects you in a slow month. A flat rent doesn't care if nobody parked that week. A percentage lease does. Also check if the lease is triple net, sometimes written NNN. That means you, not the landlord, pay the property taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance on top of rent. Read that clause twice before you sign anything. After that comes the part where you get your permits before you touch a shovel. This is where most first-time owners get stuck for months. You typically need a few permits stacked together. A grading and drainage permit, because rainwater has to go somewhere and the city wants a plan for that before you pave. A curb cut permit if you're changing how cars enter from the street. Environmental review in some cities. Fire safety sign-off in others. Permits alone can take 6 to 12 months to clear, and legal fees during that stretch catch almost everyone off guard. There's one federal rule you cannot skip no matter which state you're in. The Americans with Disabilities Act sets a minimum number of accessible spaces based on your lot size. A 25-space lot needs at least one accessible space. A 100-space lot needs 4. Once you cross 500 spaces, 2% of the whole lot has to be accessible, and at least 1 in every 6 of those has to be van accessible. Skip this, and the city can shut your lot down before you make a single dollar. Then comes actually building the thing. Now the actual construction. Most lots use asphalt or concrete. Asphalt costs less to install, usually $2 to $7 a square foot, and it's easier to patch later. Concrete costs more, often $4 to $8 a square foot, but it can last 30 to 40 years compared to 15 to 30 for asphalt. A basic lot with 50 to 100 spaces, paved and striped, typically runs somewhere between $45,000 and $350,000 total, depending on your city and your surface choice. Land isn't flat and empty by accident. If there's an old structure or heavy brush on it, clearing that alone can run over $1,000 per acre. Grading the ground so water drains the right way, instead of pooling into a small lake every time it rains, is its own line item, and skipping it is exactly how a brand new lot turns into a cracked, flooded mess within 2 years. Last on the setup side is the equipment that turns dirt into a business. A parking lot without equipment is just a big, empty rectangle. You need a payment system. A basic kiosk from an established parking tech provider runs somewhere between $7,000 and $20,000. You need security. A multi-camera setup runs $2,000 to $5,000, and proper lighting across the lot can add another $10,000 to $20,000. Add clear signage for rates and rules, usually $1,000 or more, and general liability insurance, typically running $500 to $2,500 a year for a policy with real coverage limits. Add it all up. A small open-air lot in a smaller city can be built and equipped for somewhere around $30,000 to $100,000 total. A mid-sized covered lot in a real city can run $300,000 to $1 million before a single car ever parks. That number surprises almost everyone who thought this business started with "buy some dirt now." Now we talk about how the money actually moves once the lot is open, because this is where the business either works or quietly doesn't. A parking lot has more revenue types than people expect. Short-term parking is the one everyone pictures. Someone pulls in, pays by the hour, leaves. This is your highest rate per hour, but it's also unpredictable. Some hours you're full, some hours you're empty. Monthly parking is the boring, reliable stream underneath it. A business or a commuter pays one flat fee every month for a guaranteed spot. The hourly rate per visit is lower here, but you know exactly what's coming in every single month, no matter what the weather does or whether an event got canceled. Then there's validation and event parking. A nearby restaurant or office might pay you directly to validate parking for their customers, meaning the customer parks free and the business pays your lot instead. Around a concert venue or a stadium, event day rates can run several times your normal hourly price, because on those specific days, demand goes through the roof and supply stays exactly the same. Here's the part that actually decides whether you make money. Your biggest costs are mostly fixed. Your rent or your mortgage doesn't change. Your insurance doesn't change. Your lighting bill barely changes whether the lot is half full or completely full. But your revenue changes by the hour, by the day, by the season. That mismatch is the entire game. A parking lot business isn't really selling parking spots. It's managing the gap between costs that stay flat and revenue that never sits still. Maintenance is the quiet cost that eats the margin. Asphalt needs a first seal coat about a year after it's installed, then resealing every 2 to 3 years after that. Skip it, and cracks spread, water gets underneath, and your 15-year surface turns into a 5-year surface. Snow removal in colder regions is another recurring cost, most first-timers under budget. So is replacing broken payment kiosks, fixing dead security cameras, and repainting faded stripe lines that make your lot look abandoned, even when it isn't. Property taxes are usually the other silent cost. If you own the land, taxes are based on how the city assesses commercial land in your zone, and that number tends to only go up over time, not down. Now what the profit actually looks like. Across the industry, a reasonably well-run parking lot tends to land somewhere around a 30 to 40% profit margin once the lot is stable and full permits. Insurance and staffing are all accounted for. That's a genuinely strong margin compared to most small businesses. But getting there takes time. A brand new lot rarely fills up in month one. It takes real marketing, real signage, real visibility, and often a slow ramp of 6 months to a year before monthly parking contracts and steady daily traffic actually stabilize your income. A few things that surprise almost everyone. 1. Even if your lot barely breaks even on parking revenue some years, the land underneath it can still be a smart hold, because commercial land tends to appreciate over time regardless of how the parking business itself performs that year. 2. A percentage lease can completely change your risk. Two lot operators with identical revenue can have wildly different outcomes just based on whether they signed a flat rent or a share of revenue. 3. The ADA accessible space requirement isn't optional and isn't small. Miscounting it by even one space can get your lot flagged during an inspection. 4. Your slowest hours cost you almost nothing extra, but your busiest hours are where almost all your real profit gets made. A lot that's 40% full all day and 100% full for 2 rush hours often makes more money than a lot that sits at a steady 60% all day long. Timing your pricing around those peak windows matters more than most owners realize. So, lessons for anyone actually thinking about this. First, check the zoning map before you check the price tag. A cheap lot on the wrong zoning is worthless. Next, negotiate your lease structure, not just your lease price. A percentage lease protects you far more than people realize during your first slow year. Also, budget for permits and legal delays like they're guaranteed to happen, because they usually are. Then, treat maintenance as a fixed monthly cost from day one, not an emergency expense you'll deal with later. The lots that fail fastest are the ones that skipped resealing to save a few $1,000s now and paid for it in tens of thousands later. And finally, your income isn't steady. Plan your cash reserve around your slowest month, not your best one. So there you go. Not a business where you buy dirt and watch money fall from the sky. A business built on zoning maps, permits, drainage plans, and a careful bet on how full your lot will be during the 2 hours a day that actually matter. The parking lot isn't selling parking. It's selling the gap between what it costs to sit there and what people are willing to pay not to walk another block. If this taught you something you didn't expect, smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Subscribe if you want more real breakdowns like this one, and drop a comment telling me what you want broken down next. Until next time, this has been Money Bruh, and I'll see you in the next one.